Erica Thompson had everything to live for. At just 21 years old, she was full of energy, known for her bright smile and the way she could light up any room. She had dreams, goals, and a future she was excited to build. But in the final weeks of her life, something changed. At first, the shifts were subtle, things only those closest to her would notice. A different tone in her voice, hesitation in her words, moments of silence that felt heavier than usual. And then, one night, without warning, she was gone. The person who should have stood by her side, the one she trusted more than anyone, was now at the center of a shocking discovery. Jason Reynolds, a rising college athlete with a promising future, found himself answering questions no one ever expected him to face. The story that followed would leave an entire community stunned. A relationship that seemed so ordinary on the surface had cracks no one had noticed. Behind closed doors, tension was rising, emotions running high, leading to a moment that could never be undone. What really happened between Erica and Jason? What pushed things to the edge? And how did a love story take such an unthinkable turn? Today, we go back to the beginning, following every clue, every moment, until we uncover the truth. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. And if you find this case as compelling as we do, give this video a like. Your support helps bring more stories to light. Now, let's begin. Erica Thompson had always been drawn to the kind of love that felt like a story worth telling. When she met Jason Reynolds, she believed she had found exactly that. He was charming, confident, and carried the kind of presence that made people stop and pay attention. As a college athlete with a promising future, he had the world at his feet, and Erica was right by his side, believing she was part of that journey. Their relationship started like most young romances, full of passion, excitement, and dreams about the future. There were late-night conversations about life, playful moments that made her heart race, and promises that made her feel secure. To those looking from the outside, they seemed perfect together. But what people didn't see were the small moments that hinted at something far less ideal. Jason had a way of controlling the narrative, of making sure things always aligned with his plans. At first, it was subtle. He preferred her to wear certain things, to spend less time with certain people, to prioritize him over everything else. It wasn't said directly, but the pressure was always there, shaping her choices, making her question herself. If she did something he didn't like, the warmth in his voice would disappear. The energy between them would shift. He never had to raise his voice to make her feel like she had done something wrong. Erica convinced herself that this was just how love worked. He cared, he was protective, he wanted the best for them both. But there were moments, brief but unmistakable, where she felt a tightness in her chest, an instinct that told her something wasn't right. She ignored it. She wanted to believe in him, in their future. Then everything changed. The pregnancy was not part of the plan. When Erica saw the result of the test, a wave of emotions crashed over her. It was terrifying, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of hope. This was real. This was happening. In her mind, it was a new chapter. Unexpected, yes, but not impossible. She imagined Jason's reaction, convinced that once the shock passed, he would come to terms with it. But Jason didn't see it that way. The moment she told him, his entire demeanor shifted. He withdrew from her, became distant, colder than she had ever seen him before. The same man who had once held her close now barely wanted to look at her. He didn't see this as a new beginning. He saw it as the end of everything he had worked for. The pressure from every direction was unbearable. His coaches expected discipline, focus, and commitment to his sport. His teammates viewed him as a leader, someone who had to stay in control. His family had invested too much in his future to let a single mistake derail everything. And now, Erica stood in front of him, carrying a reality he wasn't ready to face. Days turned into weeks, and the space between them grew. He stopped answering her calls, ignored her messages, and when they did speak, every conversation ended in frustration. He insisted that this wasn't supposed to happen, that she had to think about what this would do to both of them. But for Erica, there was no decision to be made. She was keeping the baby, with or without his support. That was when the arguments became something else entirely. His words became sharper, laced with a frustration that felt different from anything before. He accused her of ruining his life, of being reckless, of not caring about everything he had on the line. It was no longer about them as a couple. It was about him, about his future, about how this pregnancy was an obstacle he needed to get rid of. Erica started to feel afraid, not just of what he might do, but of how little she recognized the person he was becoming. He wasn't the same boy she had fallen for. The love that had once made her feel safe was now something that made her feel trapped. Then came the night when everything reached its breaking point. Jason sent her a message, asking her to meet him in private. There was something final about the way he worded it, something urgent that made her hesitate. But despite everything, she still wanted to believe that he would come around. That somewhere underneath all the anger and pressure, the person she once loved was still there. She had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of that door. The night carried an eerie stillness, the kind that made every small sound feel amplified. Erica Thompson drove toward the meeting spot, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel as her thoughts raced. Something about Jason Reynolds' insistence that they needed to talk felt different this time. For weeks, he had been distant, cold, avoiding her messages, shutting her out. Now, suddenly, he wanted to see her. It should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It was unsettling. She pulled into the nearly empty lot behind an abandoned building near the edge of town, a place where no one would accidentally stumble upon them. The area was dimly lit by a flickering streetlight, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked pavement. Jason was already there, leaning against his car, arms crossed. His face was unreadable, his body stiff. He barely acknowledged her as she stepped out of her car, the night air pressing in around them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he started, his voice quiet but tense. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. He asked her again, practically begged her to change her mind. His tone was controlled, but beneath it, there was something raw, something teetering on the edge. Erica shook her head. She had made her decision, and she wasn't going to be pressured into anything else. She told him she wasn't afraid of raising the baby alone, that she could handle it. She expected anger, maybe frustration. But what she wasn't prepared for was the way his expression suddenly darkened, his breathing turning sharp and uneven. The conversation escalated fast. His voice rose. His movements became erratic. He stepped closer, closing the space between them. She tried to back away, sensing the shift, but his hand shot out, grabbing her arm. It wasn't a firm grip at first, just enough to keep her there. She tried to pull away, but his fingers tightened. Panic set in. Her voice wavered as she told him to let go, but he wasn't listening anymore. His mind had already crossed into a space where logic no longer existed. His thoughts were spiraling, drowning in the overwhelming fear that everything he had worked for was slipping away. The moment everything changed happened in an instant, a single, irreversible decision. His grip turned violent, and before she could scream, before she could fight back, the struggle ended in a way that could never be undone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jason staggered backward, staring down in horror at what had just happened. His breaths came in sharp gasps, his heart hammering so hard he could barely think. The reality of what he had done hit him like a tidal wave. The world around him blurred as his mind screamed at him to move, to do something, anything. His hands were shaking as he looked around, his chest rising and falling in rapid succession. No one could know. This could never be traced back to him. His breath was uneven as he forced himself to think through the panic. He wiped his hands, checked his clothes, looked at the ground to make sure there were no visible signs left behind. His head was spinning. There was too much to process. Time felt distorted. He didn't know how long he stood there, frozen, before his instincts kicked in. He needed to erase every trace, get rid of any evidence, make it seem like Erica had never met him that night. He took her phone, deleted their last messages, powered it off, and tossed it into a storm drain nearby. He checked his own phone, making sure nothing suspicious remained. When he finally got back into his car, his hands were still trembling against the steering wheel. He sat there for a moment, staring blankly at the dashboard, his mind running in frantic circles. How was he going to explain this? What would he say if anyone asked about Erica? His heart pounded against his ribs as he forced himself to breathe. There was no undoing what had happened, but he could still control what happened next. Jason drove away into the night, leaving behind a secret that would unravel faster than he could ever imagine. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence, the kind that made every breath feel like it carried weight. Rows of spectators sat motionless, their eyes locked on the young man seated at the defense table. The golden boy who once commanded stadiums with roaring crowds now sat in a stiff suit, his hands folded, his face emotionless. This was no longer the arena he was used to. The game was over. This time, the outcome would determine the rest of his life. Across from him, the prosecution was ready. The lead attorney stood, his expression firm, his voice carrying the authority of someone who knew there was only one acceptable outcome. He laid out the case with unwavering precision, presenting the jury with a sequence of events that could not be denied. The digital footprint was damning. Deleted messages, timestamps that placed Jason at the scene, and surveillance footage showing him meeting Erica just before she disappeared. Every move had been accounted for, every lie exposed. The defense scrambled to paint a different picture. They spoke of a young man under unimaginable pressure, someone who had simply lost control in a moment of desperation. They tried to shift blame to external factors, his career, his upbringing, the stress of expectations weighing heavily on his shoulders. But the facts spoke louder than any excuse. There was no sudden loss of control. This was not a mistake made in the heat of an argument. This was a decision, planned and executed, and no carefully crafted narrative could undo that. Then came the voices that mattered most. Erica's family. Her mother, gripping a tissue in her trembling hands, spoke of the daughter she had raised, the young woman who had once been so full of life, of dreams, of love. Her father, usually a man of few words, struggled to hold his composure as he spoke of the last time he had seen his little girl, never knowing it would be their final goodbye. The pain in their voices cut through the room, leaving nothing but raw grief behind. Jason never turned to look at them. He sat still, his gaze fixed forward, his face betraying nothing. Then, the moment of judgment arrived. The jury returned, their expressions giving away nothing until the words were spoken. Guilty. For the first time, Jason's mask cracked. It was only for a second, a tightening of the jaw, a flicker of something in his eyes. But it was there. He had spent months pretending, convincing himself that maybe, somehow, things would go his way. But now, the truth was undeniable. The judge's words were final. Decades behind bars, no second chances, no way out. As he was led away, The cameras captured the last image the world would see of him, a fallen star, shackled, no longer in control of his own fate. But the question that lingered, the one that haunted everyone who followed the case, was why? Psychologists, criminal experts, and those who had studied cases like this before weighed in. This was not about love. It was about power. It was about control. Jason had spent his life being told he was destined for greatness, that he was different, special. When something threatened that, he refused to accept it. Instead of adapting, instead of facing the responsibility of fatherhood, he chose destruction. This pattern was not new. Time and time again, cases like this showed the same chilling truth. Some men, when faced with the reality of losing control, would rather destroy everything than let go. They saw parenthood not as a responsibility, but as a threat, and rather than stepping up, they erased the problem. For Erica, justice had been served. It would never bring her back, never undo the pain her family endured, but it ensured that her story would not be forgotten. And in the end, Jason Reynolds' name would not be remembered for the trophies he won or the records he broke. He would be remembered for the life he took and the future he threw away. The world moved forward, but for Jason Reynolds, life had come to a standstill. The stadiums, the roaring crowds, the endless possibilities, they were all gone, replaced by the cold, unforgiving walls of a prison cell. He had once been a man with everything, but now he was just another name on a list, another face in a place where time had no meaning. Inside, there was no escape from the reality of what he had done. The same routine, day in and day out. The same heavy silence. He wasn't the golden athlete anymore. There were no cameras, no admiration, just long days with too much time to think. But did he ever truly feel remorse? Some say he kept his head down, avoiding conversations about the past. Others believe he was still in denial, refusing to accept that his own choices had led him here. But no matter how he felt, one truth remained. Nothing would bring Erica Lawson back. No apology, no regret. No amount of years behind bars could undo what was done. The justice system had played its part. A trial, a conviction, a sentence handed down. But justice is never truly justice when a life has been lost. Erica's family still woke up every day to the weight of her absence. They held on to her memories, but those could never replace the future she was supposed to have. But the most haunting question still lingers. Could this have been prevented? Were the warning signs ignored? The slow buildup of control, the possessiveness, the unspoken fear. If Erica had realized sooner, if she had walked away before it was too late, would she still be here? If someone had intervened, if someone had noticed the shift, could this story have had a different ending? And that brings us to you. If you saw the signs, if someone like Erica Lawson was in a dangerous relationship, afraid to leave, unsure of what to do, what would you do? Would you step in? Would you speak up, even if they didn't want to hear it? Or would you stay silent, hoping it would all work out on its own? Let's talk about it in the comments, because these stories are not just headlines. They are real. And sometimes, the difference between life and tragedy is a choice to act. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime cases that need to be told. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and always trust your instincts.